All right, switching topics. Like I said, I like to get on here and say things, discuss things in a way that adds to, whatever conversation at large, topic at large is kind of discussed on YouTube or different platforms. And a lot of times these guys are just beating a dead horse. They repeat stuff like carnivore, even though they're not really doing a proper carnivore diet. And of course, all these different fads and crazes, and there really isn't that much depth to them, at least as far as the normies are concerned with them. Some of it there is depth with, like if you take carnivore and in the context of indigenous diets maybe, or Analogues, Vonderplantens, raw meat, and that's kind of what that was based on too. That has depth to it. But at the end of the day, there's not that much to discuss on it. But they'll say toxins, anti-nutrients, and stuff, which is all true. I myself got in trouble with kidney stones, and it didn't take very long. I got them repeatedly over the years. I got little small stones, and I thought I was lucky. I was like, oh, like it would pass in one day. I mean, that's enough pain to almost put you on the ground, really, and it will be if it's bad. But I got those recurring about every 6 months. Matter over a course of 3 years or so. They keep coming back. And also, I didn't know. Imagine the first time you're taking a whiz, and the first time you get past that. That's quite a surprise, and you're not expecting that, huh? And you don't really ever expect it because you have no warning that it's coming. Just bam. And that little punishment they used to have in, I think like the Catholic schools. I think I also did in Britain. There's secular schools where they had the little ruler, a little switch, stick, and they wrap you across the knuckles. Well, the nun would wind up and bam, right across the knuckles. Well, imagine getting that right across the tip of your member. Huh? That's what a kidney stone feels like. I tell you, it's not a walk in the park. So anyways, I got kidney stones I think I have 5 or 6 stones. And one time it was super bad. Like I kept getting them every time I would take a whiz over a day. I was out driving, actually. I was parked. And he was like in southern Georgia, somewhere, maybe it was Chattanooga. Yeah, I actually had to drive with it. It hit me in Chattanooga, I remember it, because I parked at this Walmart. And then I had to drive, make my delivery in somewhere in middle of nowhere, South Georgia. And then I had to go to like the Valdosta, and that's actually a pretty good place. They don't pay me or anything to endorse them. The Valdosta Medical Center, because I didn't have insurance because my driver manager didn't turn in my paperwork that he sent in and signed. But anyways, I think I went in. The only reason I went on, I knew it was a kidney stone, but then I started pissing out like blood clots, and it's kind of gross. I didn't do that before, and I was like, well, chunks of my innards are starting to come out the end of my Johnson. I better go to the hospital. It's probably an infection. So I went to the hospital, and they did a CT scan, and they're like, okay, well, whatever you had is Nigerian doctor. It's like, whatever you had, it's gone now. And I'm like, okay, good. A lot of people are critical of medicine. I mean, I don't expect them to do much. That's really what I expected. I was really just going for the antibiotics. It's like, look, this isn't going to get better on its own. And, if you ever suspect an infection, you really got to jump on it with antibiotics. And I'll say something controversial. You really should have that. If you're like, you want to be prepared, you should have antibiotics on hand, because who knows? Even with this day and age, when you get to a doctor, sometimes they pull your chain, and you're not going to be able. The CVS or whatever might be out of antibiotics, so you better have some on hand. And and after that it was fine. What really helped was this stuff was over the counter called AZO, not paid by them either, but you got to get the right one. It's got, forget the chemical in it. It's got like a chemical. It's not an antibiotic, but it's a prodrug. Once you take it in your urinary tract, it turns into an antibiotic, a slight antiseptic or antibiotic. But it also gives you some pain relief. It's like a local anesthetic. That's good stuff. That's what really helped. The rest of it was just infection. But anyway, so really what they say is you should catch the kidney stone. If you're not expecting it. I guess I was whizzing them out every time I took a piss, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know you could catch them and have them analyzed. They say there's different types of kidney stones. Well, I think the most common one is calcium oxalate, which is it's different weak. What happens in different food you eat? We'll get into this. Different food you eat has oxalic salts, so the oxalic part is bound to whatever, and then once it gets in your bloodstream or your digestive tract in your bloodstream, at some point it combines with calcium, like in your blood, and your kidneys are filtering it out, and it just collects in your kidneys. So, I read up, I spent the next few days where I was like, okay, we're going to nip this in the bud. If I have to give up soda, whatever it is, because there's all those old wives' tales about, oh, what causes this, blah, 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 oh, it's soda, no, it's dark soda, no, it's dairy, it's none of those. Dark soda maybe. That's because it has the phosphates. That's a different type of kidney stone, though. So I took a guess. I was like, I don't know which one. We'll take a wild guess. It's oxalates. What are the high oxalate foods? And have I been eating those? And we're going to cut all that shit out right now. So, yeah. Well, what was I eating? Well, my favorite food was pickled beets. So, one of my favorites. So right there, that's one of the highest oxalate foods you can eat. Let's see. Almonds, dark chocolate. Like I go out to California and go through the Central Valley, and they have these stands. You can get discount big bags of oranges, big bags of almonds. So I just chowed down on those when I was driving. Like 5-pound bags. You're looking back on it. What's the oxalate content of almonds? It's one of the highest oxalate foods too. So I'd say, oh, that's healthy. It's got some protein. I can just keep on driving here. I don't got to stop and eat. Get those big healthy bags of almonds, right? So, yeah. What else? Of course, dark chocolate. And of course, they say whole grains, like real whole grains, not the little stone ground wheat stuff or they have in Wonder Bread or whatever. I don't want to knock any brands here. The fake is just white bread, and then they put like a little chemical dye in it or whatever. Put in some bran and stuff to make it brown. Oh, it's whole grain. No, I'm not talking about that. Like real whole grain stuff. And in the bran of a lot of grains, of course, oxalates. And the vegans will say, "Well, you don't digest the bran." Yeah, it's still in there, buddy. Whatever. And of course, they might change their opinion on it. Well, some days, they always change their opinions on stuff. One day, oh, you can digest bran, you can digest cellulose just like a cow, just like an herbivore. And then, oh no, you don't digest the bran, so you don't get the oxalate. Yeah. Well, anyway, it doesn't make any difference. I cut it out. All this stuff. A lot of the corn, like cereals, like it says the corn has high oxalate or medium oxalate. Cut out all this freaking cereals and garbage and crap. Just really cleaned up my diet, So, and it hadn't been a problem since. It's been 3-4 years. 3 years now. 3.5 years. And a single cut all that high oxalate stuff out. And they used to come back every 6 months. So I think we found out what the culprit was. And I'm going to take a wild guess, swag, a scientific wild ass guess, and say it was the oxalate. I know the vegans are going to say it's that purple soda you were drinking. It's the root beer. That may not be good to drink, but it wasn't the cause. So, but yeah, so that's basically my experience with plant toxins. Now, there's some other stuff that probably isn't good, people say, but I never had too much trouble usually digesting like beans and stuff like that. No, not too bad. Of course, but oh yeah, like actually sometimes, I usually when I eat beans and stuff, it's usually either going to be chickpeas or dal, which is lentils without the husk. You take the fiber off because it can't digest that. What's the point of eating it? And the rest of it has fiber that you need. So, and that's it. Like New World beans, nah, forget that. Stuff that's based on the common bean, nah, because I ate that. Back in my 20s, like I'd eat it, and I noticed my muscles ached the next day. And they say, and the vegans are gonna say, you didn't cook it right. You're supposed to soak them. Well, these were canned, so either they're really screwing up at the factory where these guys are making it, or what? I don't care. It was like red kidney beans, which is the worst one. Black beans. I think they have phytates, is what it was. Excuse me. Yeah. So, my experience is, when in doubt with these plant toxins, why would you eat them? That's the thing. I always say, it's really just for taste, flavor, or you're not getting much nutrition from it. I can tell you that right now. A whole can of beans, say, how many, I don't know, the standard number 10, whatever, those little cans. A whole can of beans is going to be like, 20 grams? And of that, you're not going to digest. It's not biologically available. We're going to get into plant protein here, because there's a couple things. There's, some, chemically, you can't digest it. Some of it's bound to, you don't have the enzymes to break some of it down, that's so-called plant protein. Some of the plant protein is not made on amino acids. That's the big shocker. That's the part nobody talks about. We're going to get into that. And of course, mechanically, if it's bound up in, a cell, inside a cell, and you've got cellulose and stuff around it, that's not broken up. It's bound to like the husk or whatever. A lot of it's just bound up into, cellulose, and you can't digest that. So you're not getting at the protein behind some of the cellulose. Little microstructures, no matter how much the vegans protest. You just can't digest it. Now, when they analyze this stuff, and they do it in a lab setting where they put it in some chemical acid like piranha solution or something, and heat it to an implausibly high temperature, and then burn it and say, oh, well, the spectral analysis says there's X amount of nitrogen in there. That means there's 20 grams of protein per blah, blah, blah. Body doesn't work that way, okay? So you're not really, this plant protein is really, all the other reasons you're just, doing it for what? Flavor? Okay, flavor, that's one thing if you like eating that stuff. Vitamins, no. Like, people, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, because like plant vitamin A is beta carotene. Some people can convert it. I can. Personally, I can convert it. So, and how do I know that? I used to drink, just out of boredom, when you're out there driving, you do goofy stuff. It's like being a teenager or something, I was like, let's see if I had carrot juice, and it's kind of was one of my favorites. I was like, let's see if I can drink enough of this to turn myself orange. Because having an orange skin color is one of the most badass things you can possibly do. Take it for one of the former presidents of the United States. Take it from him. So, yeah, but I never could do it. So my body was converting it into vitamin A. It's beta carotene. It's actually just a plant pigment, and your body converts it. Some people do, some people don't. Okay, so different vitamins. They say vitamin C. I've heard if you don't eat a lot of carbohydrates, you don't need that. I think I'm beating a dead horse here. I think really only thing people you could conceivably eat plant stuff for is the protein. Okay, you have a side of beans maybe on with your chicken or something. Say you're Cuban. You have your plantains, your black beans, your chicken, your rice, right? You're trying to boost your protein. That's a good idea, I guess. Now, the problem with that is, proteins, I think, what is it, 21 amino? I know some people are going to say, it's 22. Well, I'm just walking here. It's off the top of my head. So is it 21 amino acids? 9 of them are essential, or 10, is it 10 or 11? I don't know. But you get the gist. That's, the big thing is, with plant proteins, it's not just limited to those set of amino acids, right? A lot of people don't know this. Nobody, here's the part, you can fast forward to this part. Nobody talks about this. Hardly any, not the carnivore community, not anybody. Those plant proteins are not just assembled of the standard amino acids. And you have something called amino acid analogues. And what those are, just little chemicals, and some of them are amino acids, they're just not the standard set, right? Imagine if you had like a bag of Legos and then you had some random ass like off-brand non-Lego stuff, imitation things that they're thrown in there, and that's kind of what these amino acid analogues are. But the plants, they can build the full proteins out of them, amino acids and these amino acids analogues. And it's anybody's guess why they do this, whether it's just happens to be it's a mutation where it's more efficient to build proteins this way, or it's a defense, or who knows. But they do. I'm going to go into there's actually some scientific papers about this, and you say you've got 21 amino acids or 20 something amino acids. Well, I think they've already cataloged like several hundred of these amino acid analogs. This is the scary part. And then the scary part is these are relatively recent discovery. So, the way things are politically with the food industry and global cabal, and they push everything to be one way. It's probably not going to get a lot of research unless it's someplace that's completely different from the Western world, where there's maybe China might do it, right? But who knows? They're trying to copy the West a lot these days. But anyways, so you got hundreds of these different types of amino acid analogs, and I'll give you an example of one of these, how dangerous they can be. Actually, they've been noted, as far as folk knowledge or folk wisdom has been passed down some different fruits. I wish I could remember the name of it. The guy that does the Weird Explorer channel where he eats all the different fruit, there was some kind of like little crab apple cherry thing. And he said, yeah, if you eat too much of this, it'll make you sick. It's because it has this amino acid analog in it. I can't remember the name of it. But the example that I was thinking of that's very notable is something called ODAP. That's Oscar Delta Alpha Papa. And that's an amino acid analog that's found in something called the grass pea, which is, I think it's a legume. That's used to be, they try to use it for a food source. I think it's because it's drought resistant or it's a very hardy plant. And so throughout history, they've kind of gone back and forth. They said, well, there's this suspicion that it's toxic, and then they say, no, it's not toxic, and they've gone back and forth trying to experiment with it. And what it is, it's got this ODAP in it, and it's very insidious stuff. And what it'll do is, I'm just using the top of my head here, so I don't get it completely accurate, but you can look it up. ODAP and the grass pea. When the grass pea was, and it was used in the concentration camps in World War II, Germany's concentration camps, because like, it's wartime, they were low on food, they could grow this in gardens and stuff. They said, well, we just use this as a food source for the prisoners. And whether it was just that simple or it was some kind of sick experiment, I'm not quite sure, but a lot of the prisoners, what happened is, eventually they eat enough of it, eat a little bit. It's not acutely toxic. No. You might be able to eat a little bit, and depending on various factors, you'll be okay for a little while. But if you keep eating this crap, you'll become paralyzed from the waist down. Very slowly and painfully. Paradoxically, you think paralysis wouldn't involve pain, but this does. Because it happens, slowly it'll start losing their ability to walk and just stumbling and stuff, and eventually it'll end in complete paralysis from the waist down. What happens is, where they think the mechanism is, it's this amino acid analog. So your body doesn't recognize it as being a foreign. It just thinks it's kind of like an amino acid, one of the ones it uses to build proteins. See, what happens when you ingest protein? Protein is, of course, made up of a whole bunch. It's a macro molecule. It's made up of a whole bunch of amino acids. It's a polymer, and you eat it, and your digestive system will break it down to amino acids again, and then that'll be used by the body for whatever it needs that for, to build different proteins. So your body doesn't recognize this as a toxin. It doesn't disable it. It just uses it as one of the other amino acids. And what happens is it gets incorporated into your proteins, and since it's not quite that amino acid, it's something different. It creates a malformed protein, and your body won't. It'll get incorporated into your body's tissues, and I think it's, of course, it's the nerve. It's the nerves in that particular area. So that's where it gets incorporated into. It's where it's sensitive to it. So it's being used by your body to create these proteins. Part of that's in your nerve tissue, and I'll get into that. There's something else interesting about nerve tissue and nerve damage here. So that's what results in the paralysis, and that's kind of why it takes some time. It's got to be integrated into your nerve tissue. It's got a certain amount. And this guy's coming up. And so, that's the gist on that. So that's just one of them, and there's a whole bunch of other ones out there, and we don't really know exactly what the effects of all this different stuff is that people are eating. They say plant protein has this toxic material in it. Inherently, I'm not talking about additional different toxins in the plant. I'm talking about in the plant protein. So there's no getting around it. Now this should be something that should be studied, and preferably all the plants should be bred not to have that, or everything cataloged. It's like, this is dangerous. Nope, of course not. That's not the way our system works. They love disease. It's very profitable for them, and so that's why it's each and every one of us, our own responsibility to have awareness of causes of disease as much as we can, and just avoid it. Because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So to hell with plant protein. The chances are that it's toxic, then to hell with it. And it's not a very good source of protein anyway. It's not very digestible. What was I going to say? Okay, we're going to go on to part 2. Okay, this is toxic plant protein part 2. Now, the way the ODAP kind of damages the nerve tissue, it kind of selects for that and damages that. That's kind of interesting, because there have been a lot of anecdotes, and it's not just a couple. There's been a lot of them, where, especially among ex-vegans, they've said that they were diagnosed with MS, or they had the symptoms of MS. This is, of course, a nerve disease where supposedly the body's immune system attacks myelin sheath of the nerves. And then you get all the symptoms from there. Well, what if it's, this is a hypothesis. I don't know if anybody's brought this up. Could be, again, that's why you listen to this channel. Because you don't hear this anybody else. Either it's censored, or the people are just real shallow and they're just kind of riding a fad or craze. There's not a whole lot of critical thinkers, are there? That's why you come here. So, my hypothesis is that this nerve damage that's these guys are getting diagnosed with MS. I'm not saying all MS is like this, but this could be mimic the symptoms of MS when they're getting this toxic amino acid analogues, and it's damaging nerve tissue in a similar fashion to the way, might not be so site specific, but it's kind of and it might be more mild, but it's doing kind of the same thing that ODAP is doing. And the sad thing is, I'm telling you, that's as far as that hypothesis is going to go, other than just avoiding these toxic compounds. You're not going to have any National Institutes of Health or Johns Hopkins. They're not going to study this. They're not going to try to cure people. You know? Oh, that's quackery. Veganism is great. And Cinnamon Toast Crunch is a fucking food group. You know? That's their position. So they're already made up their mind. They're not interested in studying and eradicating disease. That's pretty clear. Now, that's why they're, and that's why those institutions are filled with DEI. That's why. I mean, see, people are putting the cart before the horse when they look at DEI. These institutions aren't full of fucking, just, I don't know, mannequins. Let's call them mannequins. Empty suits. Totally incapable of any kind of critical or independent thought, in any way, shape, or form. They made up DEI to cover for that, for the other causal agent of that. They're like, okay, people are noticing, everybody's incompetent. Let's find something to it. Let's put in this policy that they can blame. They can attack that. It leads them away from the real cause of mass incompetence, which is, it's engineered to be that way. All right, so that's just a little rabbit trail for that. But as far as the neurotoxic amino acid analogs, just say the hell with beans. I think Saladino was right. I mean, it's the one thing he's right on. He's wrong on a lot of stuff, and not just because he likes carbs. He's a phony. Come on. I'm not going to get distracted on him, but it's one thing that he's right on. Beans are bullshit, and they're not just bullshit. They're fucking neurotoxic. Yeah, no. So, but anyways, there's a lot of people, and if you are one of these vegans, ex-vegans, that had these symptoms, or you might even be diagnosed with, might have been diagnosed with MS, and then you quit and you went carnivore, or you just quit being vegan. And this, because you don't have to be carnivore. You don't have to jump on the next bandwagon. I would say, look, and that's kind of what the Von der Planet said too. I mean, he used vegetable juices and nut butters and things like that. Carnivore, people that say they're carnivore turn their nose off at. I think that's BS. And eating meat that's just cooked to death, and focusing on high protein, those are the two big mistakes that so-called carnivore community makes. Okay? Meat in nature, as far as paleo tribes and stuff, you really don't have to go that far back, do we? Because up until when was it? When did the Lakota surrender? At Fort Laramie, 1858. There you go. How were they living up until that point? Raw meat, 100%. Now, when I say raw meat, what I mean is they would slaughter a buffalo, and this is especially true before they took the horses and incorporated that into their culture. They would have to mass slaughter buffalo. So what are you going to do? You don't have refrigeration. You don't have any way to preserve. You can't freeze it. None of that stuff. Of course, what they did was, how they hunted the buffaloes. They chased them off a buffalo jump. So then you got 500, 1,000 dead buffalo, or or whatever, maybe 50 dead buffalo, depending on the size of the herd you were chasing over the cliff. But anyways, you got a lot of work ahead of you, and you cook and eat some fresh, especially the organs. That's why they eat the liver first. That's like a sacred thing. It represents the life of the animal, and stuff like that. And but other than that, you have a 2,000-pound animal, probably 750, 800 pounds of beef there. What are you going to do with it? You got to dry it. So that's what they did. Now, they didn't cook it and then dry it. They just took it. I don't know if you ever taken a piece of beef and been in a dry climate. I think the summer in North Dakota or South Dakota, summer in the Dakotas, out west, it's pretty darn dry, I'm going to say. I remember one time I got a piece of, I was driving a truck and I had like this ground, no, it wasn't ground, it was just regular chuck steak. And usually you have to use a wet cooking method to make that nice and tender. And, but if you eat it raw, you'd be surprised. It's actually pretty tender and stuff like that. It's actually, none of those cuts that are tough when they're raw. I see a lot of people don't know that. Oh, interesting, huh? Anyway, I was eating this chuck steak raw. I was driving the truck. I had to make my deliveries and stuff. I was going on the radio, so I put the chuck steak up on the dash. And I don't know, I was distracted by something. I had, hour or two. And then I took the chuck steak back, bit into it, and it was already starting to get hard on the outside. It was already starting to crust up. So that's how easy it is to dry beef when you're in a dry climate. But that's what they mean when they say, those tribes, people in paleo times, ate raw meat. You know, that's the only way to preserve it. Yeah, god dang, people out here. Of course, whenever I'm on a roll, you just get people coming out of freaking nowhere, and then they're following me. It's great, isn't it? Good thing I'm on. It's just a nuisance. It's not. I'm going to break this off into part 2. So what we're talking about, you know, raw beef, carnivore diet people. All right. So you don't have to latch on to that stupid carnivore. If you're ex-vegan, now look what you should go look at Vonderplan's stuff. Because if you're ex-vegan, if you're vegan and you're suffering, you're starving yourself to death, and you have a bunch of mineral deficiencies, what you're going to want to do is you're going to get your raw, of course, get your raw liver, and some of the other raw organs. There's a whole protocol. That's where all the nutrients are in the animal, the bone marrow. You're going to get animal fat. You're going to get, especially his involved lots of, and he uses raw dairy. I don't really care if it's raw or not because it really doesn't affect me either way, personally. So don't be too hung up on, oh, it's got to be raw. If you're fine with just regular dairy, pasteurized dairy, that's fine. There's also light pasteurized, like they heat it to a certain temperature. You can try that. But the real thing is, you know, if you eat yogurt as your dairy, it's irrelevant whether it's pasteurized or not, pretty much. People argue, or whether it's raw or not, and people argue, but they're ignorant. They're colossally ignorant. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't form toxic compounds, none of this. It's just you're going to break down the protein and amino acids, and the rest of it's there. So lactose is gone because it's been fermented, or most of it's gone. But anyway, so if you're ex-vegan, that would be my step into it. His was high fat too, like doing like this. I think he made these drinks out of raw butter. Yeah, that would be good because grass-fed butter is noticeably more tasty than the other stuff. That's the one thing. You know, some of these dairies, it also depends on the dairy you get it from. You know, I think that's more important whether it's raw or pasteurized or not, because it could be raw. That's the other thing. I'll tell you what, the old grain-fed versus grass-fed beef. People go nuts over this. They're like, oh, blah blah blah. You know, the only difference in that is a slight difference in the omega ratios. You know, overall, because the beef to begin with, it doesn't have a lot of unsaturated fatty acids in it. It's mostly monounsaturated and saturated fat. And so if the ratios are a little messed up, what does it matter if there's not that much in there to begin with? There's less than like 2% polyunsaturated fats in beef fat. Does it really matter if it's 6-to-1 or 3-to-1 or whatever it is? And you're getting a tiny difference. See, it's marketing. Now there's a difference in taste. And I've had grass-fed beef that tastes like shit, and I've had pretty good grass-fed beef. But I get a piece of USDA beef. It's like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine for me. You know, I like that. I like you kind of can taste the corn in it. You know, the whole corn, slight corn, where they fed it all that corn and stuff. It's got that little hint of corn in it. Especially when you cook it and you smell it, you can really smell it. But my point is, with USDA beef and some of these feedlots, the cow's a calf. I don't know how big they get them before they sell them to the feedlots. And then they fatten them, right? And these feedlots, they give them, here's the thing people get confused on. And this all started with Oprah, right? When she went in her little complete logic-defying fits of rage on national television and got all the Karens on her side. Oh, the beef is toxic, the pork is toxic. Yeah, no, that all comes from Oprah. That's where all those memes come from, right? Because that's so overblown. USDA beef and USDA pork, you consider history, because you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. Nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to be 100% perfect. Not even stuff that's natural, because that can be full of parasites, or could have eaten toxic foodstuffs in nature. Nature's full of toxins and poisons and stuff. Look at goat. Goat's a good example. A lot of people are city slickers and you just don't understand, farming and stuff like that. If you have a goat or a cow, I'm not sure if it affects cows, they eat Jimson weed. There's different names for it, Datura, devil's apple, and there's other toxic plants they can eat. It'll poison the milk, and in some cases so strongly that it will give the milk drinker delirium. It's called, I think they have a name for it, milk fever or something. See? And that could be completely natural and unpasteurized and stuff like that, but it's still very toxic or even deadly to drink. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Now, in these feedlots, they'll feed them a corn byproduct and soybean byproduct. And what these are classified as, I think they were used to be classified as industrial agricultural byproduct. So then Oprah hops in. Oh, look, they're feeding them industrial waste. It's toxic. Well, no. What it is this cornmeal, it's a byproduct of ethanol production. So they make their wort, W-O-R-T, or their mash, and their mash done, they ferment it to just like they're going to make beer or whatever, and then they distill that. Well, they're going to have solids left over. They're still going to have chunks of corn and stuff like that, even though they got a lot of the starches off and fermented it to alcohol. That's not going to be 100%. You're going to have leftover parts, and the solid bits is just the cornmeal, the stuff that's left over from that. So then they strain that, wash it, and then off it goes to the feedlots. Now, can it get moldy or something on the way? Yeah, maybe. But that's going to hurt the cow, so they really want to watch out for that. Molds are some of the most toxic things around. And the last thing you want, what are cows worth nowadays? $5,000 a piece, $6,000 a piece. Last thing you want is to give them some crappy substandard stuff or something that's spoiled, and to hurt your investment. So the odds of that happening to you, eating bad stuff, pretty low. Okay, so the cornmeal, that's classified as industrial waste. It's just distilling grains. This is what's left over from the distilleries when they make your E85 fuel, which, by the way, is probably one of the best motor fuels ever devised. People criticize that. That's because they're stupid. Everybody should be able to have a choice of what they buy, but maybe we'll get into an engineering discussion about the merits of alcohol fuels. That's another video. But the other thing they feed them for, let the cows get their protein in, you got to get their macros, because cows need their macros too. It's not just for us keeping fit. They got to have good macros so they can get the nice beef and the nice marbling and stuff, because when you're injected with tren, you got to make sure you get your macros in. People don't get the joke. That's where tren comes from, trenbolone, the steroid. It's used in cattle. They use it on cattle to help them beef up. Now, humans, of course, have since used it to help them beef up. But you know what? Somebody should do an experiment on bodybuilders. One of these bodybuilders. If you're a bodybuilder and listening, you want to do tren, I'm not telling you to do tren. You can do whatever you want in this world. It's up to you, and I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything illegal. Now that that's out of the way, if you were to do that stuff, how about you kind of go on a simplified diet? You could augment it with some certain things, but get like 80% of your macros of like defatted soybean meal and I would say like white hominy grits. You could do the yellow hominy grits if you're hard up, but I think the white tastes better. That's going to be pretty close to what the cows are eating. You got to figure out what ratio they feed those cows, right? Or feed the steers. Because now, by God, that's what it's formulated for, right? And humans aren't cattle, or most of them aren't. But it'd be a neat experiment to say, look, I'm going to go on an 80% diet of defatted soybean meal and hominy. Could be the yellow or the white. Figure out your ratios and your macros, and see if that gives you a nice, good, beefier physique, like it does on these steers. And now they are steers too, which of course is we're not going to get into that because I'm digressing as it is. So the defatted soybean, what they do is so they say that the soybeans are grown, that's sprayed with glycophosphate and pesticides and all kinds of crap, and it's grown in toxic stuff. Well, I mean, that gets pulled out. They take the soybeans out, the whole soybeans, and they industrially process it to squeeze the oil, and they use solvents to get that last little bit of oil out that they can't through pressing. And then they do a bunch of stuff. And then they keep on washing that soybean cake, the ground up soybean cake down to get all the oil out, getting all of it out, and then they rinse it and rinse it and rinse it. Okay, and that's all either discarded. The oil, of course, goes to further processing, and that's fed to humans. So all the toxins and stuff that's washed out, it's all in the oil and in the water that they spray and leach it out. I'm sure they use steam and stuff at some point. By the time it's all processed, the solid part, the soybean cake that's left over, that's been washed pure. It's clean as hell. It's the cleanest thing you can imagine. So all the toxins are in the oil, and that's fed to humans. So that's all your glycophosphate, and that's all in the soybean oil. That's in your Doritos and all your different stuff. Now, I don't want to get sued by Doritos, so maybe they use canola oil, but you get the point. But the toxic part is in the soybean oil. That's used to make junk food and vegan food. Oh, I'm being redundant. I mean, stuff that ill-informed people eat. Okay, so the soybean cake, the soybean meal, the solid part that's left over, it's got the protein. It's been completely, everything's leached out of it. It's been washed down like 15 times at that point with solvents and steam and water. It's clean. So then they give that to the cattle. That's fed to the USDA beef. Then it goes to the feeder lots. So they're getting the corn byproducts. It's been washed of all its stuff too, because it was gone through fermentation. It's been soaking, and then it's rinsed and stuff. So it's clean. The soybean cake's clean. I'm telling you, these USDA feeder calves have the cleanest diets in America. I'm not joking about that. So people bitch about, oh, it's grain-fed beef, blah, blah, blah. That's the cleanest eating animal probably in all of human history, and I'm not joking about that. You know, they get pretty much pure protein. It's got some fiber and stuff. It's a soybean cake. It's like, it probably doesn't even have any of the phytoestrogens left in it. That's all washed out in the soybean oil. You know, it's probably just pure fiber and protein, and the plant protein, and then the carbohydrate from the corn. They get pure macros, dude. and they're living a life of trembolone and pure macros. So that's how all that beef gets produced. Now, if it's good for producing USDA beef, who knows? Like I said, it might be good for producing beef cake. You know. And any one of you guys, go ahead and try it out. I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything illegal, but corn and soybean, just try that as your macros, and see how it should give you the ideal fat distribution on your body. You know, your ideal body composition, because that's what it's for. It's to give the beef the perfect marbling. So maybe it'll work in humans too. It'll give you the perfect body comp, right? You know, instead of having subcutaneous fat, you'll have marbling. It's kind of in you. You know, it just kind of makes you look bigger. But you, you know, where was I going with that? Yeah, so the grain-fed stuff, you know, now let's compare that to some grass-fed. What are some of the abuses that can go on grass-fed? Well, one, they can lie. But what are some of the other abuses that can go on? Well, you don't know what kind of grass it's eating. You know, it's certified, you know, they say, oh, it's organic and it's eating well, they could have been just sending this thing out where there were toxic plants. Like I said, there were toxic plants, and usually it doesn't get into the meat, but it could be put on rangeland where it's just eating like kind of semi-desert. It's just eating plants that are high in terpenes and stuff. Usually I'll make the cattle sick, but you know, they can eat it, and it will give the meat a gamey taste. And I've had grass-fed beef that just tasted weird. And I'm sure that was the case. Now here's the other thing to look for. How do you know that these cattle weren't just put onto pasture into like ex-brownfield sites that are just so polluted or whatever? They could have been like a lead manufacturing facility, and now it's just a meadow. But you know, like in the early 1900s, it was like Acme Lead Smelting Company. So its soil's just full of lead or cadmium or whatever the heck, and it's going straight into the grass that's growing there, and then the cow's eating it. Is that toxin getting into the beef? I don't know. Oh, but it's grass-fed though. It's pure, right? Well, there you go. That's the reason you guys come to this channel, because I'm the only one that can discuss this sort of thing. Everybody else is just completely over their heads. They never think of anything like this, ever. And